Welcome back to the open electoral area directors meeting. We're at item number 4 on the agenda. Rise report. There's nothing to report on from the rising report from the electoral rules meeting. Item number 5. Consent agenda.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Ask the question. Any opposed? Hearing none. Move on to 5.1.
No, we just did that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Any business arising from the minutes?
I don't think so.
Okay, move on to agenda item number 7. Staff reports and other business. CAO purpose update.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to have a conversation with EAD committee members around electoral area priorities and how to ensure that they're included in organizational priority setting by the board. And if you pass back to the last board meeting, we presented a number of tools that we propose to use as part of a more formal process of managing our work that starts with the board setting priorities, us aligning staff capacity, reporting on that work, and then quarterly enabling a conversation at the board level to consider reporting on progress and discussions around prioritization. Have things changed? Have new priorities emerged? Does the board have new information? And I know we have had in the past different tools to capture different sets of priorities. And I think that's one of the reasons that we still have a very long list of assigned work that is not programmed and may never get programmed. And we continue to add work to that list. And what I would propose and what I would like to see the board consider is sticking to an approach where we have one list of priorities for the organization so that we don't differentiate between an electoral area director priority, a broader board priority or municipal area director priority, but we have one, the board speaks as one, we have one list of priorities assigned to staff, we do the work, we report on it, we get new work assigned and we get to work on that. And so what I will share by email shortly with electoral area directors is just the follow-up action list that was presented to the board last board meeting, which is meant to capture all of the assigned work that the board has directed to staff over the recent past, some cases going back 10 plus years. There are 50 some items on that list right now. None of those items are resourced. So that's a parking lot, if you will, of work yet to be done when capacity is freed up, and that capacity is currently working on the board's priorities for 2023. What I would like to ask the committee to do is if you could please review that follow-up action list. If there are things that you want to see accomplished in your electoral area that aren't on that list, first off, if there's something that's been directed in the past that's fallen through the cracks and is not on that list, please let me know. If there are other things that you would like to see on that list, please let me know. Because what we want to do for the board in March, which will be our first quarterly review, is we want to bring a report forward because we're still going through the annals. There are people down in the basement combing to-do lists. We're still trying to get our arms around all of the direction that's been provided. Yeah. We want to come back to the board and say, here's what's in the parking lot. And depending on the size of that parking lot and the types of activities, there's some things, for example, from 2003, we should probably just say, if it was assigned in 2003 and it hasn't been done, it probably doesn't need to be done.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that question. I was just made a note for myself. There's maybe a lot of old stuff on there that should just come off.
There may be. So that's what we want to bring forward to the board in March as part of that first review. But I want to make sure that we have it. So I went through the January 2022 version of your aspirational lists, and I pulled the things that I would call concrete pieces of action. Because some of those things were still, I think, in the sort of the idea stage when I read them. But if you could please review that follow-up action list document and provide me with any feedback. If there's a priority that you've brought forward that isn't reflected, or if there's something you want to be on that list, please let me know. And where we want to, I believe, where we should try and be as an organization is when we do those quarterly reviews, which then lead to a review in the fall, as the board says, here's what we want to accomplish in 2024, that we're looking at all possibilities. We're not treating, an electoral area any differently in terms of assigning capacity to do the work than we are to an idea that might have a regional impact. That those are the work to be done all comes from the same place. So should we not have one list of priorities that the board says with their board hats on, says, yep, we got to get at that Area A trail strategy, or the Area D District of Squamish agricultural policy, or whatever the next item is for Area B. So it's kind of been left unaddressed, and there wasn't a really good opportunity, and I think we need to acknowledge that and learn from it on December 1st, 2nd. But those priority sessions should be, I say should, ideally, one would think they'd be regional. And so if you've got something that needs staff, time, effort, and resources in an electoral area, that should be just as important as, or considered in the same conversation as an initiative or an item elsewhere in the regional district. So I just wanted to share with you kind of the process piece and ask if you could please review that list when you have a time and share any feedback with me, questions, concerns, but also just really open to your thoughts and ideas around prioritization and how we assign work. And the last thing before I stop talking is, I think one of the reasons we have such a big disconnect between supply and demand is we don't have an effective way of capturing and all looking at the demand. So in your mind, you may say, why can't this get done in my electoral area? If you don't understand what the work plan currently is, where those priorities came from, what else is in the parking lot, then it's impossible to put that wish or want into context. And I think that's where we need to get. So we know what are the wishes, wants, and needs, and where are we on doing the work. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
It's interesting, Beckett Street. I took those pages out of that PDF and just made that its own little, maybe about 3 pages, or no, it was quite a few pages. And then I went through and I highlighted the ones that are related to Area A. And so I've kind of done a little precursor of it. I'm thinking to myself, each one I looked at. Yeah, the next step is for me to prioritize and ones that aren't needed anymore, and that whole concept. But there are, like you mentioned, there are others that you need to get on Area A. And I don't like that process. I think it'll work good. I'm just wondering on that fuel spreadsheet, if they couldn't have been separated out, A, B, C. And D.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You can see what Area A wants, what Area B wants, Area C and Area D. We know kind of the full context of what's taking place. Knowing that there's a lot more population in Area C and D.
And I think that would paint a picture too, having that on the work plan so that you could visually, as an example, if all the work was being done in one area, then it would, that would jump out at you. It would be more apparent to the board who has to ultimately set the priorities. And that's a very, we're wide open. Any thoughts and ideas for how to format that too? That's simply a table in a Word doc that was put together pretty quickly, but we can definitely add that.
Yeah, has the staff found any more to add to it?
Yeah, that list, I think it's a pretty good list, but I'm certain there are things that have fallen through the cracks and aren't on there because I tried to comb the current places we've captured initiatives But I'm sure there are others out there. And so for that March board meeting, we're hoping to get to the point where we can say, here's what the board said, get done in 2023. Here's the work plan. Here's everything else that's next. And slowly start to get everybody on the same page, say, okay, there's 75 things. What are the next 5? What are the next 3? What are the next 10? And if you think of that one pager, and we don't have to stick with these formats, they're just to start, but the format that Gord brought on December 1st, 2nd has a now, next, later idea. Perhaps at some point the board could say, okay, here are the first 5 for 2023. Here are the next 5. And then you're seeing, okay, mine are moving up the queue. And have there can be a more robust conversation around priorities. And the challenge too is that this is not to say that if an item pops up anywhere that needs to be worked on, that we can't work on it. Like priorities will change all the time. And there are some pieces of work that don't require a conversation of the board. Like if it's tricky, but you may have a question that may be able to be answered or dealt with by a part of staff that doesn't impact their work plan. Yeah, that takes an hour, 2 hours worth of work. There's an impact, but I can get that done in the midst of what I'm doing. Other things, when you say, as an example, I'd like us to look at X, well, that's actually going to take some, dedicated time in the work plan. That needs to go into a board conversation around priorities. So we have to find a way to manage that without saying no. There's run-of-the-mill date, there's regular operational stuff that we need to be able to do when asked to. And then there are things that rise to the level of projects or initiatives that we can't do without taking away from the priorities the board has already set. So that needs to come to the board as part of its quarterly conversation about priorities.
You mentioned something you're going to share.
I was just going to send that fuel back out in an email.
Okay.
And I just did that.
Follow
Action list.
Okay, that's what you were talking about before.
Yeah. So how do you propose the electoral areas directors to do this? Did you want to do it at a meeting, or did you want us to work through it and then give it back? Or
Yeah, if you could review the doc and just provide your feedback to me, either say it's okay, or this is no longer a priority, or this is something I'd like to do that's not on there. We'll bring all that together, and that'll be part of the report that comes to the board in March around, here's the current parking lot. So here are the priorities that have either been already directed by the board or identified by electoral area directors as current priorities. We'll bring it all together, and that's what and we'll have to find a way to, over time, to categorize that maybe into 12, 24, 36 month kind of time frame, but help the board take all of that and either say, we can't be managing 75 next items because it's ridiculous. Well, that's why we are where we are. But help the board find a way to say, here's the next 10. Like here's what we want to get done in once our already identified priorities for 2023 are complete.
is this more totally protected? Or
No.
Okay, yeah, I just opened it up. So we can make comments on it. Yeah.
Yes, one of the, so ask a question there. We heard today, careful what I say and what I don't say. Let me take the Upper Squamish Valley. When I look at Area D and Pinecrest, Black Tusk, they tick along okay. Ring Creek, there's things happening at Britannia, but that's all happening and it's progressing. And staff are involved as and when they need to be. Same with Murray Creek, and that's so those things are kind of easy to quantify, if you like, and to recognise. The Upper Squamish Valley situation, I'd like a discussion with the board at some point, just to make sure everybody else shares my vision for that, because I'm looking at really supporting the development of agriculture. That to me, that's a very important thing. I was disappointed when at a board meeting, the board chose to just rubber stamp as okay an application for non-farm use. I think I would have preferred the board to have said, no, we're not approving that. But it was a Squamish business and we've got to support Squamish business. No, I don't think so. Not in that circumstance. So I'd like to have that discussion to see if we can get on the same page, because I don't want to be wanting to do things or wanting staff to do things in that valley that's not supported by the board as a whole. So somehow that, for me, that, and it would be difficult for me to list priorities there. You can see what's involved is a number, and it's going to take a lot of staff time, a lot of staff effort. So for me, that is the number one thing, notwithstanding the fact that there's other things happening that are more routine, if you like. So.
And I think we need to go through that process to learn. So if you take, like, label that Upper Squamish Valley work any way you want. Let's call it, I don't know, Upper Squamish Valley work. But that's a project, right? There's a number of things that
promotion of agriculture,
right? Promotion of agriculture.
Yeah.
There's obviously a number of pieces to that.
Yep.
For the board to, and this is where, and I would just take advantage of the opportunity to say the number one priority of the board is to do exactly this. It's to prioritize. That's the number one job. Thank you. That's a paid political announcement, but that's the most important thing
No
any
hiring
board
you.
can do anywhere. Yeah. And so for the board to consider what you'd like to see done there, above and beyond the judgment around, is this decision good or bad? That's part of board work. But in terms of where that issue sits today, where you as the elected official there working with the community would like to see it move, that requires a conversation to say, how big or small is this piece of work? What are the options to do that piece of work? So this could be something that's contracted out, but really the question the board needs to have answered so that it can deliberate about priorities is, well, how big is that? And is it a 6-month project, a 1-year project? Is it 30% of a staff member's time, 50% of a staff member's time? We actually have to, because what I would say I've observed is by not doing that, we just say, yes, we'll do that without, it's kind of like walking around a store with a gift card in your pocket and you don't know the denomination of the gift card, and you're filling up the cart with stuff and you get to the end and realize
It doesn't cover it.
my mother gave me a $25 gift card again. And you thought it was, you've got $400 worth of merch. Like, that's what we're doing. So for the board to actually be able to do, in my humble opinion, what its number one job is, we need to be able to describe that and say, it's a 6-month project. It would take 30% of this person's effort. And only if we do that will we actually be able to prioritize and get work done. Otherwise, that just goes on a list and it sits on a list for 3,
That's
5,
right.
7,
Yeah.
and you don't see your priority move. The underestimating the capacity available or the quantity of work involved in something, I think is what, not deliberately, but just because of the way we operate, is what's led to this follow-up action list of probably 10 years worth of work.
Yeah.
And as the more we sort of discipline ourselves in doing that, the better understanding we'll all have of, okay, what's on that gift card? What do we actually have available? Because the person that may need to lead that project as a project manager has a day job too. And so not all of their time, they're not just waiting for projects and initiatives to lead. There's that side of defining our capacity too.
I got one question. Like, is there any way in these documents that there could be estimated time to completion? With any project, you've always got a timeline, right? So especially with these items that we have here, could there be a column like an estimated time completion and even another column of how many departments have to deal with that one particular item? Because you're correct. When I was working in doing everything I was doing, everything was time-based. Everything. And looking back at your history of work that you've done in the past, give you a really good idea of how long certain tasks are going to take. Right, and so that having that added knowledge for electoral areas and the board would be pretty good to have, so that you understand when you're asking for something like that, this is what it's going to take, and then actually have it documented, because it's just an estimate. It's not cut in stone, right? Could be less, it could be more. But, you know, we should be able to, over the years, actually have a good history of what it takes to do some of these things.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm thinking when you speak to that, of when Gord was here on 1-2 December and he tried to just quickly help the board through a little prioritization exercise, it's time it takes to accomplish it, the resources, urgency, you know, health and safety. Like there's when the board meets quarterly to review this, it's always clunky. But if you know, over time, you can get pretty good at that when you've got a set of criteria you look at and say, okay, I'm wearing my board director hat on. You know, how do I define the number one priority? Well, it's a combination of the number of people it'll impact, who would benefit from that service change, risk, health, safety, time required, resource, like all those things would be helpful to help the board make those decisions.
Yeah, but one of the very last tasks I had, I brought in training for job plan development. And it went through all those elements you went through when you planned a job, because you knew you were going to do it again.
Yeah.
So now you've got a template
Yeah.
for that. You may have to change a few things, but now you got that template. Yes, how much it costs of material, you name it. The contractors, the list goes on. So having that whole concept in something like this, I mean, it doesn't have to get too complicated like that, but a few of those elements you just mentioned would be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
It's good for staff. It's good.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, it's a bit of work to build it. But once you got it built, it's reoccurring, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I was mentioning at one of the other meetings, was that, you know, in 4 years, if we continue to down this path, we're going to get really good at doing what we do as an organization.
Yeah,
including directors.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But we did a bit of an exercise like this with Melanie, because she had the same concern with this huge list of but we did it, the 4 area directors. She essentially brought us that list, and I remember it well because a lot of my priorities floated to the top, which is a little bit unusual. I mean, A is very different too, actually. You know, with the different climate, you know, we're recovering from massive fires and like it's poorer, more sparsely populated. It's just kind of a different flavor than the rest of the south. But LCTVRA came right up to the top because it had been ignored for so long.
Yeah,
You know, the little thorn in the side, that the ombudsman was telling us to sort this out. So that's why that was up there, and we did sort it out, you know, but as you've observed a number of times, it's because we had, you know, one dedicated, capable person just working, knocking those things off, not being ever interrupted with anything else, just staying on task.
Yeah.
So we did that quite well, the 4 of us, and I don't think I'm saying that just because it came out well, but I think we've sort of, and I'm wondering if at the March EAD, we can have a bit of a review as area directors. Once we've all given you our input, we're just smarter as a group sometimes than we are as individuals. And
If EAD would like to do that sort of before, that's certainly within the,
I would really like that.
Yeah.
And thank you.
And so the Strategic Services Department, which we're going to evolve and transition into this year, which Kristen will lead, that really represents, with some exceptions, that is probably 80% of our project management capacity. People who will be sort of, if we do it, if we're successful, there'll be a fence around them. And in a perfect world, they'd be able to focus on those change agenda items, those initiatives. And I think what we'll learn is how much work that team can take on. And as you say, we've had a good example recently where somebody's been fenced and they've been able to pick up some of these long-standing pieces of work and just start moving them. And that's the idea that we're going to try and recreate and enhance. And that's why it's that same group of people. Like if I look at initiatives like, you know, a regional climate action plan or regional transit or connectivity, or it's the same group of people that will be focused on those types of issues and the service establishment changes and some of the other ideas that electrical area directors have. So we only have one place for that work to get done. The board's job, facilitated by us, is really to, what are the priorities that you want to feed into that team?
Got it. I mean,
and then it makes clear. So if things are moving well enough and great, and if it's not, then we can understand why. So if there are 10 priorities and only 4 can be managed, it's because that's what they demand in terms of time and focus. Like a Lillooet Lake Estates, as an example, is obviously a much bigger project to manage and lead and do work on than the
establishment for LCTV, redrawing a line, really.
Right.
Yeah, it was just a bureaucratic process.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
Uh-huh.
The climate action plan I'd take right off there.
Well, I wouldn't.
See, I would take it off as a task that staff need to be involved in. So what are they going to develop? What do we want them to do? You know, it could take forever, and we end up not doing much. I would rather look at that, have that as a sort of thing in the back of our minds, if you like, and pick on something specific. Like, are we serious about electric vehicles? If we are, let's get a station here so that we can charge. Let's convert our own SLRD fleet to electric vehicles. Let's look at the problems we would have going to somewhere like Braylon, to Lillooet and so on, make sure there's electric charging stations there. That to me is worth spending a bit of time on a specific project rather than a climate action plan, you know, which is more of a, we haven't got the power to do large things that are going to affect climate, but we do have the authority or the power to do a little thing like the EV. So,
Well, I just think it should be kept in mind with every single flippant decision we make. Same with First Nations. And I think that we've really been dropping balls there, but you know, we're in good company with every other sort of government that is happening. We've got to learn that slightly different way of approaching business. And I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of is the solar panels at the rec center, right? Because it is a positive move towards solving, you know, the climate crisis that we're all in. So,
but I don't want to pay somebody a big salary to develop a climate action plan. I think we can.
We already kind of know where we can
bring in things that like we put that solar stuff down at Britannia Beach years ago now, but there wasn't anybody saying this is part of the climate action plan. There was just an opportunity. There was some grant money available, and we did it. So
Area took advantage of that too.
yeah. So.
And these are the exact type of, like from a administration perspective, these are the exact type of conversations you would want to see happen at the board. So the board can decide, do we want to go this way? Do we want to go this way? Do we want to go this way? And then our job's to do the work to go whichever way you decide. And there are obvious choices, and that's the, you know, in the absence of those choices being made and being clear, then we're sort of left to, you know, you've got different expectations. And you're trying to do a little bit of everything, when in an ideal world, the board has those very interesting conversations, because they are really interesting. But the board says, at the end of the day, here's where we've arrived at a board, staff, this is what that means. And then
Yeah.
then we go to the work.
I actually like your approach, because you take a look at, what I'm trying to do up there with the church, to get a heat pump in there instead of the well furnace. And where our pioneer Lions office, part of their renovation is that there's 2 heat pumps going in there. And so you take a look at what other facilities does the SRD have where they could be using a heat pump. I.e. the SRD building in Oak, which is basically run on propane.
Well, and I just funded a couple of heat pumps for the search and rescue operation, or I think I did. Anyway, they were gonna ask me, I was all in favor. I don't know that we're keeping track of any of this in terms of that might be something that we want to do. But I think as long as we're moving in that direction.
On a completely different topic, I would suggest that we stop saying at the beginning of meetings that we're grateful to be on First Nations land.
We stop saying that.
Yeah, I think it's become meaningless. Now,
And Nefty's writing a paper on this at Sauter School of Business right now. He asked me for some advice. I went, oh my God, that is such a complicated. I'll write you an essay on the email. We're not going to waste conversation. I did.
before I make that kind of comment, though, I think what should precede that, I think we should consider stopping it. And I think we should talk to the local First Nations and say, ask them what do I think about this? Because I've had a First Nations person tell me, waste of time. What are you saying that for? You don't mean it.
Oh, no.
We say, well, it's reconciliation, is it?
One of the UBCN meetings I went to was on this, it had that topic in it. But what they suggested is that you use other words. So I changed the bottom of my signature to reflect that, where I say now that I'm working to build meaningful relationship with First Nations.
Yeah, and I would support that 100%.
When I was looking at ours for this meeting, I was thinking of saying something along that lines also included in that. But it's definitely a topic of conversation.
Or like what Jackie's trying to do is with that land acknowledgement is you actually have to say what you're doing.
Yeah, and I had feedback from July
Yeah.
because we were having this conversation. And they say, as soon as you say Statlium, you're saying Statlium Nation. You don't have to say nation, just say Statlium.
So that was the end of my verbal.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
And
Wait,
we have
Chair,
to-
look what it did.
Give us a timeline when you send the list.
Oh, okay, I just said it, but anytime by end Feb would be great if
Okay.
that's possible.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah,
totally.
thank you. And have a motion to receive.
So moved.
I'll sing it to second it.
Oh, okay.
Any comments or questions? Question? Any opposed? Motion carried.
All right.
Oh, question. What does FUEL stand for?
We just went over that.
No, what I missed what the
Follow-up
acronym.
actions.
What?
Follow-up actions.
Or follow up. I was trying to figure out the U.
Oh, Suzanne's here.
Yeah, we're on to 7.2, information report 2022 select funds, and we have Director LaFrance.
Lost my idea.
You talk to it. Director LaFrance, could you want to speak to that 7.2 22 select funds?
No presentation for this, so just if there's any questions, I'll take them.
Am I seeing the PILT allocation is coming in as of the beginning of the year? Is that? Because there's no date attached to that transfer from other services and the PILT allocation. Is that 2023 sitting right there, Suzanne?
I'm not following what you're putting down here. So what are you trying to?
2022.
These are select funds, right?
Yeah, Yeah.
And you're speaking about PILT funds?
Well, just that I consider all BC Hydro money built allocation, and some of that comes into the select funds.
Yes, yes, it is mainly funded from the PILT, BC Hydro PILT allocation based on the policy.
And that comes in and is placed in these respective accounts. Is that in January when that happens?
No, we don't receive the PILT funds until like July, August.
And then they go into the EAD accounts.
Yeah, so they actually are funded in July or August. We allow you to pull from the funds during the year, but you don't receive interest on those funds that haven't been actually sent into our bank account.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to receive the report.
Yeah, I want to see that.
That's good.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Have a seconder, please?
Yeah.
Go. Okay, any comments or questions? No, hearing none. Call a question. Any opposed? Motion carried. 7.3, information report, February 2023, select funds. Director LaFrance, could you explain what you've done with this one, please?
For some reason, I'm having a hard time hearing, but I think you're talking about select funds again.
2023 select funds.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no presentation for this. So this is the first draft of the January 2023 select funds. So it most likely will be updated next month with revised surplus carry forward, because the 2022 hasn't been finalized for interest yet. But so if there's any questions on these reports, I can answer.
Director Raymond.
So Suzanne, if there's like on the, I guess it's on the 2022, there's an amount for me for $5,000 that was for waste bins at Ferry Creek in Britannia, garden waste bins. Now that contract should have been paid by now because they were taken out in November. And it was, I just put 5,000 in it because Angela didn't know how much it would cost. So that will get automatically sorted.
Yeah, so we're not finished the 2022 financials yet. So most likely it just wasn't notified to our staff that this invoice was to pay for those, the select funds was to pay for that invoice. So we're still refining and we're still accruing all of these fundings. So yes, it will be adjusted when we post that entry.
So you don't need a motion from me to deal with that at all.
No, if it's
No.
already a board resolution, it's just waiting for us to move the funds.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? We have a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item 7.4, information report 2023-2027 electoral area directors budgets.
Okay, so did you want me to share my screen again like last month? And we'll go through just the agenda notes.
Please.
Let's try that.
Right.
Do we need that light out?
Yes.
Right, so the BC assessment values used are the 2023 completed roll. BC assessment mentioned earlier that there was errors in this rule, but have recently communicated that the reports are correct. So the average EAD assessment went up 10.91%. For non-market change, which is all of the changes not related to market shifts, there is 2.05% increase in 2023 due to non-market change. So essentially, any tax increase at 2% would be absorbed by the new market, not the new assessment base. And looking at these updated budgets for requisition review, combined, they show a 21% increase, mainly due to emergency planning requisition that shows a 94.5% increase. These budgets have revised the building inspections, slightly reduced further from last month as a 59.5% reduction. And then elections UBCM service also has a slightly less taxation rate compared to last month of only 3.2% increase to 31,000. And the salaries have been updated to the 6.6% increase for CPI. And the health and wellness benefit is still shown as the original policy amount of $500 per FTE, and it will just remain this way until there's a resolution of the board to adjust it. The 2022 forecasted amounts are still not final, so they're still subject to change. And the civic addressing, this hasn't changed from last month's view. There is basically that sign project still in the works. However, there hasn't been any uptake into it. So all of the available funding is shown as being spent in 2023. However, most likely this will carry forward until it is completely used. The building inspections, 1,400 cost center. The surplus carry forward is now a little bit higher at 265,701, and that's due to the increased building permit revenue over budget in 2022. This budget did change the previously budgeted large format scanner. I have a request from the director of from Kim Needham that she wanted to instead have the expenses for consulting for document scanning. So that is the change you'll see in 50570, that account. It's also for records management as well. So there's additional consulting for large document scanning for archival building permits. And the operational reserve is very healthy for this service, and it is actually above the maximum recommended. Are there any questions on the building inspection service?
Just curious, the reasoning behind that, or the large scanner, why rather go to a consultant rather than doing it in-house?
I have a feeling it is, I don't know 100% why the request changed, but I have a feeling it's because there's not enough space for this large format scanner in the office.
I think it wasn't one of the purposes was also to take a lot of the old drawings and digitize them, right? Am I correct? Yeah. So is that all going to get consulted out, or? Yep,
that was the request, to have just outsourced scanning for these archival permits.
So the other question I have, maybe it's not for you, more so for the CAO. We're going to digital, permits being brought in with all the digital files. for, buildings, for building permits and so on and so forth. So we have a printer here that's capable of printing out large scale maps or drawings.
I can't speak to the capabilities of this current printer,
Hi.
but I know somebody who can.
Yes, I was listening. Yes, Chair. So the reason for the request was we initially thought we would do in-house scanning, and when we crunched the numbers, we realized it would take so many person hours to scan all of our files. And they just wouldn't have time to work. They'd be scanning constantly. So when we looked at the numbers, it really, and in buying the capital cost of the printer, the scanner, it's actually cheaper and more efficient for us to go to outsource it to a document scanning company who basically comes in and takes our files away, scans them, and gives them back to us.
Takes them away within
Okay.
Canada?
So the other question I have is
It's in Whistler.
with being able to, people that are going for building permits, so on and so forth, so their drawings can come in digitally now. And getting away from having them to print out X amount of copies and then bring them in. We have a printer that's able to print in large format.
Yes, we do. It's aging out. It's probably 7 years old now. But we feel that we have a couple more years that we can use it, but we are going to be requesting that the public submit electronically. And that, everything will be stored in the cloud going forward. So yeah, it's going to be a very, very big project, but it'll also help our level of service with the particularly the real estate community who are in here very regularly wanting to look at building permit files. And this way we will be able to show them the files electronically. We can have a version with redactions.
Thank you, that's excellent. Because I hear that all the time, having to bring in, go get them printed and then bring them in and so on and so forth. Yeah. It's really good to see us moving forward on.
Yeah, we're quite excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I had a question, but it goes back. It's an earlier question. It's a really basic question. Just, Suzanne, I just saw EAD services combined show, this is on page 20, page 20. EAD services combined show a 21.3% increase. And is that because the inspections were up or the inspections were down, the emergency planning was up? Was that those two other numbers? Just that I was a bit lost there.
Yeah, so I just highlighted the changed requisitions, but yeah, it's basically the full set of services, what the total change was for all of the EAD services. So that's civic addressing, building permits, elections, emergency planning.
All rolled together.
Mm-hmm.
Is that much more? Okay. And then what do we do with the excess was my other question. When the amount exceeds the reserve funds guidelines policy maximum recommended out, and I went, oh, okay. It's good. What happened? What do we do about that?
Oh, we just use it when we need it. We don't have to reduce it.
Okay.
It's
not
a
problem.
reserve, and they're just reserve guidelines.
And it just, just sits there. Okay, thanks.
All right. So the next service is elections UBCM service. I updated the UBCM convention cost just slightly to 9,000. It was 8,000 last year, so it's just minor increase. The school districts have been billed out for their elections costs, so that's the main update for this service. And it did reduce the increase for the need for the increase for the tax requisition. So that's where it's gone down from 34,000 to 31,000. And there's nothing much more to talk about for this service. Unless there's questions about this service. Okay. And we'll go to emergency planning service. The current deficit, oh, did I hear?
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay.
I had to catch up from you.
The current deficit carrying forward in these budgets is 31,537. That has since been reduced slightly. So in the next March iteration of these budgets, you'll see it's gone down to about 28,000 now. But it's just because there's still estimates within these budgets, and I've been, as invoices come through and everything is refined, I refine my estimates. And also we've drilled down into the time allocation revenue for 2022 and adjusted that. With the new staff, not everybody charged out their time appropriately. And if you don't post your time on your timesheets, it doesn't get charged out. So we're reviewing all of that and we've made some adjustments, but unfortunately it didn't make this round of budgets, but you will see that adjustment next month. Nothing else changed within this service versus what you viewed last month. But I will pause for any questions.
No questions?
All right. And this package also shows your select funds. However, I'm not going into discussion on them, just thought I'd mention that their select funds are within this budget, these budgets as well. But we'll go to the EA Community Park Service. This service is going to be changed into 4 area services, which are already adopted, 3005 to 3008. And the funding remaining is the statutory reserve, which is the capital reserve bylaw 810, and the surplus carry forward, which is 1,983. And this budget shows what it would look like just to have a negative requisition. Instead of trying to find a way to spend these funds, we can just send them back as a negative requisition. So this budget has been prepared to show what that looks like. And it also leads to the reduction with the overall change in the taxation. So you'll see, sorry, this is not exactly clear, but there's the negative 7,000 for a negative requisition, which does help just slightly. And I just pause for the EAD's comment on that.
Any comments? Where would that funding go?
It goes back to the service area. So the same service area that paid into the service, it just gets refunded back on their property tax.
Okay. So these, the 4 service areas that were recently adopted, with starting off with 0 funds in there.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, that's 0 funds. I'll go to that service really quickly and just show you the reserve funds that will be moving. So there's area B specific reserve of 3,798.67 that will be going to the area B specific regional parks and trails. Same amount for area C and area D, minus 1 cent. And this will be divided by all 4 services. It's just the remainder of the reserve for electoral area parks. This amount has to go to area A. It's specific to parks in lieu of cash in lieu of parkland for the Tyox Mountain Resort development many years ago. So it's just a little small amount for area A regional parks. And this is the area B regional parks fund that will be going to the area B specific electoral area parks fund that will be going to the area B regional parks.
So just, may I ask, just while you're talking about that item, sorry to interrupt, but I was just thinking that I wanted to ask about the 300,000 that was set aside for what's called Seton Park, the one that's on Anderson Lake, the one that we're sort of starting to have some activity. Will that money, because it's designated for that one part, can it go into this fund and be spent out of this fund? I just thought that would be the logical order of business.
So that Seton Park fund is, I believe,
Gas tax, or what was called gas tax, yeah.
yeah, so it's gas tax fund. So yeah, that will stay in general government, but will be transferred instead of transferring the expenses here. That whole project will be shifted to your area B regional park service, and it'll be transferred there.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, it's-
We answered the question about the other.
Yeah.
We have
Well, it,
going back as a negative tax requisition, is that?
so with the negative tax requisition, that's what will happen. It'll go into our electoral area parks. Correct.
Just- Sorry, I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, I was just pausing to try to formulate an answer, but just these reserves will be transferred to your parks, and this capital reserve that I mentioned, it's from bylaw 810 plus it's here from transfer from reserve plus the surplus carry forward from 2022. Those will be sent back to the taxpayer in this version of the budget if the EAD wishes. I just thought I would show what it would look like to have that negative tax requisition instead of trying to figure out how to spend that capital amount in this budget.
Right. So that's the simplest solution from your point of view. Okay, got it.
I believe so. The province allows these negative requisitions.
Would you require a motion?
No, it doesn't require a motion. If you wanted to approve this budget as is or or recommend approval to the regional board, you could do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, they will just come back to the March meeting for further review and discussion.
I've got one question for you. I'm going to just go down to where there's a requisition. Let's just take a look at elections in UBCM.
Sure.
The first page of it. Well, I'm on the PDF. I'm on 13 on the PDF.
What have you gone down to?
I'm on the PDF version of it, so it's 13 on the PDF. She'll have it up here. Okay, the question I have is at the very top of this document, it lists off the assets in each area, and area A is 250 some odd thousand or million, something like that. So when we come down to these assessments, I'm looking at 35 million. So what does that 35 million mean? Like, where does that come from? Because I've never been able to understand that element of it.
These are your assessments. So basically, I believe this is the converted assessments. But this is all through reports from BC Assessment. So these are directly from BC Assessment downloaded and inputted.
So all the assessments that, so let's take my house, for instance, and it's assessed at X amount. That's where this is?
Yeah, this is a full area A and the remaining, like all of the area A, but assessments are within this, yeah. It's the
But
full,
that's on the-
full areas.
On the first page, it's 200 completed roll net taxable values 295 million.
Yeah, so these are the converted values, and these are needed to build the residential tax rate. So that's why you see different amounts here. So this is actually all of your assessments converted to residential to get the residential rate. And the BC Assessments provides these converted assessments as well.
So does that include industrial properties?
It's converted, so it takes all of the property classes, including business and other and industrial, converts it to the taxation based on a uniform rate, which is then to build this estimated residential tax rate.
Okay.
So it basically takes all of the residential rate times 10%, all of the industrial rate, I think it's 34% is the tax rate. So it just converts it all to one uniform rate to build this estimated tax rate.
Okay, so if we go back to the UBCM election one, that 35 million is the actual taxes that each one of the properties in area A collectively, that's what we put in $35 million.
Yeah, it's not something that you would be easily, it's not something I can easily explain, except that it's the converted assessments that BC Assessment delivers for this reason to build this assessment, this estimated tax rate for just the residential.
And not industrial?
Sorry, Sal, maybe we can take this offline and I'll try to explain to you. I can just find some documents from BC Assessment that explain it a little easier.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I'm sure the other electoral areas would appreciate it.
You copied me on it. You couldn't do any harm at all.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We'll read it.
And are there any more questions for Suzanne?
No. No, thank you, Suzanne.
Someone make a motion?
I'll move what you want moved.
Well, it's an information report. So
Are you approving? We have to approve it, yes, right?
yeah, I think we're ready to.
Well, Suzanne finished her presentation.
Yeah, you finished your presentation, correct?
I approve them. I'll move that we approve it. No, is that not what we want to do?
What would you like us to do? Would you want us to receive it or approve it and send it to the board?
You're mute.
Sorry about that. I think you can just receive it this month and then they will all come back in the March meeting.
I'll move we receive it.
Second,
Did you second it?
sorry, I thought we had to approve it now.
Any comments or questions? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Franz.
Oh,
So,
We're on to number 8, directors' reports.
I haven't got any.
We don't have any.
I was lazy.
Correspondence for action. 9.1, request for funding. British Columbia Mountain Foundation proposed Isaac Creek outhouse.
oh.
And that was
Okay.
what Russell wanted, up to 5,000 with receipts.
Yeah.
So we'll have to make an amendment.
So a motion to fund British Columbia Mountain Foundation up to $5,000 with receipts for the Lizzie Creek outhouse.
With funds coming from Select.
Select area C. Not B, not A, not D, C. So moved.
Second.
Reimbursement of up to 5,000 percent of that reimbursement. Thanks.
Seconded by
Yeah.
Director Rainbow. Any comments or questions? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carried. We will move forward to 9.5.
I'll move that funding of $4,000 per year for 2023, 24, 25, and 26 from Electoral Area C Select funds to go to Pemberton Secondary School Scholarship Bursary Program.
And I'll second that.
Seconded by Director Burke Jones. Any comments or questions?
I think it's pretty funny that they misspelled secondary in their letter. Just the kind of thing I noticed.
I haven't got that. Oh, I haven't got that.
Okay, I'll call the question.
Yeah.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Any late business? Hearing none. Directors notice of motion. Are there any directors notice of motion? Hearing none.
Move adjournment.
All righty. Okay.
Would you like to second that?
I actually don't think.
I think you don't
move to
need a
adjourn
second.
Needs a second. I think that's one. Does it need to be seconded?
We second it.
I don't think it actually needs it. Yeah. But
Seconded by Director Burke Jones.
Correct. Anyone opposed?
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Tony, for making the motion.